Hey guys, machinamechlord here, and welcome back, Gears. I'm going to be uh, going over some stuff that's really kind of important now. The first thing I want to go over is the winner of the Heretic Dragon Ruler deck, and that winner is Momo Bond. So Momo Bond, congratulations for winning yourself a Heretic Ruler deck. Sorry, but not the entire extra deck is there because I haven't received the cards like I should have had, but there is still a full complete extra deck there. But some of the key cards aren't exactly there, like the Draco Sack and the Big Eye, because one, those are just really too expensive, and I never received the actual Felgron Dragons like I had requested and ordered. So you're gonna have to deal with what you get, but you get an entire full deck plus a full extra deck. You know, two Stardust Dragons, two Azure Rises, and stuff like that. So congratulations, Momo Bond, you are the winner of the deck. Contact me and we will set up how I'm going to get it to you, no expenses and stuff like that. Anyways, now someone had asked me to do some ban list predictions. So here's kind of what I think is going to happen with the new ban list that's going to be coming up for the next format. Now, currently, this is a water fire format, which that means that Fire Fist and Mermails have generally been on the top of the list the entire time. Biogens have been up there too, but they're like the main three major meta decks that people have been using. So, I mean, I potentially see that maybe Bear would be dropped down to two, or even limited to one, or Tenki might get dropped back down again because it's been being heavily used this format. So I think maybe Tenki will get dropped down to one, or maybe even banned or something like that. I mean, it's just crazy to see these decks just do good. And Wolfbark, I think especially, will probably get limited down to one, just because Wolfbark in the 4-axis builds are just really just too damn good, and are pretty difficult to stop. But a well-timed Max C, could really put an impact in this, or effect either can put an impact to Wolfbark, or they play Tanky into Wolfbark. You just flip Mind Crush, call Wolfbark, and get rid of whatever that they have in their hand. It's a Wolfbark. I mean, you can just do some pretty devastating things to them, and things like Overworked completely destroy them. The 3.5 axis builds going for their big 3-summon play. You play Maxi, let them go into that, they go to attack you. You play Overworked, boom, destroy all of their shit, and just kind of get rid of those as a whole. Mermails have been kind of really doing good, and I think honestly Mermail Abyssgund may see the list because she just allows you to bring back your big monsters. And I mean, once again, Maxi can come into play, get rid of this, or stuff like that. But Abyssgund really just gives them advantages because they can play things like Phoenix Wind Blast or Raigeki Break and just destroy them as a whole and just get rid of them entirely. And that's just another thing that can just wreck your opponents. You play Wing Blast, bounce back their stuff, ditch Gundi, then Gundi, get back lead, and then on your turn you can just summon something, then use lead, get rid of it. Send something from their hand to the graveyard. You could just do really stupid things with the cards you have. I mean, with like Atlantean Marksman, you can summon Marksman, you can summon Dragoons and send to the graveyard for leads effect. Just there's so much stupid derpiness that can actually occur off of a Goond play that can just be ditched to just really screw your opponent over too. So I think Abyssgund might see the list. Megalo sets up for those Sphere plays, and I mean ditches 2 cards, sets up for Sphere. Maybe Megalo might see getting hit down to 2, maybe 1, or even Abystius, because Abystius is the one that they usually sit on as a defender. They just like summon it first turn, ditch Dragoons, and then Dragoons get, Deep Sea Diva. The next turn they use Diva, go for Gungnir, then Gungnir pop stuff, destroy more stuff by ditching infantry and marksmen. Then overlay that with Abystius, and go into Draco Sack and pop more things, get 2 tokens. I mean, they just do some ridiculous stuff off these cards. Or maybe even go one step further and alleviate Abyss Pike down to maybe 1 or something. Just kind of stop them from getting a lot of their kind of efficient plays going, because Abyss Pike really is a play starter or a play ender depending on how you want to proceed or follow through with it. So it's just kind of like one of those things that I can potentially see Abyss Pike getting alleviated. Now, another thing that's really been doing good is Bujins. Bujins, honestly, have always just been a very strong deck, and since they're getting yet another Beast Warrior, I feel like they're going to be doing just that much better with it. I mean, I've even started seeing them actually sack and OTK people now with some of the new builds that I've been seeing for the new builds with Hirame here, which it can just special summon itself by removing Bujin monsters from your graveyard. Bujins are easy to side against, but I feel like that they know that they're easy to side against, so that they're going to counter side against that. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, huh, can we really stop Bujins as effectively as we want to? And the answer to that one really is no, because the smart Bujin player is going to have the answers to come back from your answers to them. So they know that you're going to side against them, so they're going to side to protect them, and then they're going to get that game win because they stopped your responses, which you probably sided out like 4 or 5 cards that you needed to get into stuff that you could use against them, and they sided against that completely and just wrecked that, and you just like drew that. You didn't draw anything. You didn't draw strong against anything else. You just kind of lost the game because you sided a little too much against them, and they counter-sided you siding them, and then they're going to side against you. If there even is a game 3, so it's kind of one of those things, where you have to really be careful. And Bujins, honestly, are just a deck that's really too good right now. Those Bujin control decks, sitting there on Kaiser Coliseum, like on Susanoo and Kaiser Coliseum, or on Yamato and Kaiser Coliseum, like you're not going to get over that very easily. And that's honestly Bujin's weakest matchup is the control Bujin deck. I mean, Mermails just die. Fire Fist at least has a chance against that because Fire Fist is good at popping the monsters off or popping back row off because they have things like Gorilla and they have Bear. And it's very easy to get into them, as to where in Mermails it's difficult to get into your Marksmen and your Dragoons, and like your Marksmen and your Infantry to get over that kind of stuff because you're really not going to be able to. I mean, you need to be able to stop them from being able to activate things like Cranes. So, I mean, obviously you're going to want to be able to go for Armadis. But if they have Kaiser Coliseum on the field, you can't go for Armadis, which would just be like you play Deep Sea Diva into Marksman, then sync for Armadis. You're not going to be able to do that because of Kaiser Coliseum. So once it's just another one of those things that's going to be really kind of bad, a bad matchup for them. And Bujin's main weakness is either Imperial Iron Wall, so they can't banish at all, or is going to be Macro, so they can't get any monsters in the graveyard, which I prefer to side Macro and Defissure against them over Iron Wall, because Iron Wall doesn't really do anything of effectiveness against other decks this format. And plus, like next format, it's going to be a real Lightsworn oriented format. When Primal Origins comes out and they get their Felice and stuff like that, and they get their cards and their stuff that they want. So they're going to be on the top tier list, with their with the Ruler Sworn builds that I've been seeing going around. Those are really overpowered, and Macro is just one of those things just completely shuts them down. I mean, they can't get Wyvern to the grave, so they can't go, and bring in their rulers or bring in their, JDs. They can't search for it at that point. They can't bring in Light Ray Daedalus because they don't have anything in the graveyard. So they'll have all these high level stuff that they just can't really use because Macro just completely got rid of it. And I mean, Felice is going to be their one out to it, but if they can't mill to the graveyard, they can't get Felice in there. They can't do anything really, so it just kind of just defeats the purpose of Lightsworn. So I mean, Macro against Bujins is really good. They can't get monsters in the graveyard. No matter what they do, they're not going to win because they can't drop Crane at that point because it's like, oh, we have to send this to the graveyard. Well, we can't send it to the graveyard at all, so we can't Crane you. So that's just another reason to have Macro against Bujins. And a lot of decks really can take advantage of Macro. There's not a lot of things this format. I mean, there are a lot of decks this format that people just don't think about that can actually run Macro. Like Gadgets, for example, can run Macro and Defissure in the side deck and not even be affected. I mean, Fire Fist is just one of those decks that you can have it, you cannot have it. It's not necessary that you don't have it because you don't always need your stuff in the graveyard, but you want to be able to get those on them as fast as possible. So it's just like, what do I do? Like, what do I side in against that? Because I don't know if my deck can take that or not. You just have to play smart and efficient with it, and that's one of the things that people just aren't good at doing. So in my opinion, no, in Bujins they could honestly do with dropping Yamato to 1, and I think honestly that would be completely fine. Dropping it to 1, I think they'd be completely fine. I mean, there's other builds that I've played that that I've played different builds of Bujins that don't require the use of Yamato. I've had builds that do that, so it's just one of those things like you limit Yamato to 1, I can still play Bujins. Mikazuchi, it wouldn't really matter, if you drop that down or not, because Mikazuchi really doesn't provide any tactical advantage to Bujin decks. So Mikazuchi is just kind of like one of their 2 of cards that's just there because they can use it on Crane and they can just get their stuff up, but they can't speed the deck up with Mikazuchi really anymore unless they're running the reincarnations and stuff like that, which then in that case they can, but I don't really see that being too big of a threat. Honestly, though, when Bujin Hirame comes out, that's going to be where the biggest problem is defeating them, because Bujin Hirame can just banish cards of the graveyard and special summon itself, which just makes Hirame way too good. But the thing is she can just do really dirty things to your opponent. Plus, it's a 2k attack, and when you drop Crane, it's 4k. So it just makes getting over it that much harder. It really does. And with Hirame being rank 4, you can play her in crossbreed decks, and you can play like crossbreed chaos Bujins, and be completely fine, because if you get her in hand in a Bujin of the graveyard, I mean, you can banish it, summon Hirame, or banish lights and darks and go for like BLS or something like that, and just kind of come up with some different combo plays and stuff like that. And anyways, things that I think are going to possibly be back in the ban list would be something like Elemental Hero Stratos, because Stratos really just was a one turn thing. I mean, we pay 4,000 life points for a hero lives, bring in Stratos, search for Bubbleman, summon Bubbleman, go for Blade Armor Ninja. I mean, is that really so bad? Is that really so bad or so difficult to get over? No. It gave them more monsters, and they didn't have to use so many spells and traps, which now they have to run more trap heavy. But the thing is that really just ruined Hero Beat was because they banned and limited a lot of the good trap cards that they used at the same time as Stardust. So Bubble Beat just completely got destroyed and wrecked, to a point where it's really not that plausible of a deck anymore. It's really not that playable, and it didn't really help the deck any. It just completely destroyed it, and that was just like, oh, they won a game in Chile, and they won the next, they won the YCS in Chile, they won the next YCS after that, and then poof, they were gone again. Like, they were like 2-shot quitters, and they're still, on the down low. Like Gladiator Beasts, for example, have, what's that card? Bestiari. Honestly, it wouldn't hurt to have Bestiari come back to 2. Honestly, it wouldn't. Because, because Gladiator Beasts are just that one-hitter quitter. They come in, they do good, once every format, and then they're just gone again. They come in, they're good, and then they're gone again. It's just one of those decks, like Hero Beat. Hero Beat would come in and it'd be gone again. Best Gladiator Beasts would come in, they'd be gone. Dark Worlds, they come in, they'd be gone. Evil Swarm, they come in, they'd be gone. So limiting the cards from them, really not that big of an issue, frankly, unless like people were like able to like make super meta builds of like Bestiary that just like destroys everything. But that's very unlikely. Honestly, in my opinion, that is very unlikely that would potentially happen. And Compulse being at 1 doesn't hurt too much, doesn't not hurt too much. It can come back to 2, it can come back to 3. I'd be happy with it at 2 or 3, because it allowed me to play a bit more defensive and would allow my opponent to play more defensive. So it would just make things honestly harder for other players, that are playing meta. It would just make things honestly harder for them. It would make them have to play a little bit more cautious, or play a little bit safer or smarter, whatever you want to call it. It would change the way that, people play. And the thing is with that, it allows more defense to be brought in and allows less offensive decks to to be playable. So it would change the meta around a little bit, change the format around a little bit, and make it even more slower and more controlled, which is honestly right now what this format is. It's either a it's in my opinion it's a very slow format right now, very slow paced decks. Decks not around everywhere, just OTKing. Like the very few decks that still are around OTKing people is like what's that deck? Heradic Rulers, still one of the few decks that, does try to OTK. Karakuri Girgia, just one of those OTK decks that people just aren't that big of fans of, and are honestly easy to beat because one properly timed Max C, or one properly timed Mirror Force, without something to protect you or a way to get rid of them, is really honestly just a serious threat to them. And with Mirror Force being at 2, it's a very likely chance that you're going to run into one of those cards. So, like my question is does banning them or something like that really make that big of a difference? Not really. It just makes the game a more slow, controlled game, and it gives more players more opportunities to play different stuff, even things that are like outside the meta, that would have potential to do well. Which that actually brings me to the deck profile of this discussion, the recent Umbral deck that I've been playing. And it's actually fairly good, and it puts its work in and just really just slaughters a lot of the people I play against, because they don't know how to counter against it. They don't really have a huge side deck against this, nor really understand how it works by the time they've already lost. And this deck is very consistent, and I usually have my responses to my opponent's stuff like every game. I draw my main responses and draw into something I can use to make a monster to just get stuff going and just to get plays going. So we're gonna get into the deck. We have Dark Arm Dragon, 3 Kage-Tokage, 2 Masked Chameleon, 2 Maxi, 2 Secret Sect Druid Drew, 3 Umbral Horror Ghoul, 3 Umbral Horror Unform, and 1 Will-o'-the-Wisp. We have 1 Lord of Darkness. For straight draw power, we have 3 MSTs, 2 Dualities, 3 Recurring Nightmare, 3 Upstart Goblin, 1 Bottomless Trap Hole, 1 Compulse, 1 Dimensional Prison, 2-Dimensional Prison, 3 Fiendish Chain, 2 Mirror Force, 1 Solemn Warning, and 1 Torrential Tribute. Now, honestly, though, I think we can just drop out a Recurring Nightmare and throw in a Dark Hold, because I have found situations where Dark Hold would be much better over another Recurring Nightmare, because I honestly draw a Recurring Nightmare way too much for my own good. And at 3, I kind of felt like it was a bit too cloggy. But basically, Recurring Nightmare just allows you to, recycle your ghouls, recycle your Drews, recycle Unforms, and just keep playing off them, when need be. Like, you go for Unform, you attack, you let it die, you go in for Ghoul, you go in for Will-o'-the-Wisp, then you can just go in for another Unform, bring in 2 more Ghouls, or like a Ghoul and another Unform, and just kind of like gear stuff in the grave and just make it easier to draw into your responses, draw into your monsters that summon them back, and just kind of do things. But that's the main deck, of course, and for the extra deck we have Crimson Blader and Stardust Spark Dragon. We have Abyss Dweller, Dagus Emerald, 1 Diamond Dire Wolf, 1 Excited Knight, 1 Evil Swarm Ouroboros, 2 King of the Feral Imp, 2 number 101, 1 number 50, 1 Master Key Beetle, 1 Crazy Box, and a Photon Pepper Operative. The reason why we have the 2 King of Feral Imps is because we have 5 monsters we can add total. 2 of which, well, they're all very important to this deck's survival, and it's really one of the main key strats. It just kind of makes this deck, work as well as it does. And I might swap into a 3rd Max C and just alleviate the Umbral Horror Will-o'-the-Wisp, because I don't really find oftentimes that Willow is even really that effective. So I think I'm actually going to just take that out for a third Max C right now. Because I find that I end up needing Max C's way more than I need Willow. And like when you draw a Willow, it just ends up a dead draw and just kind of doesn't really provide much use in the hand. Unless you draw like Ghoul with it. But for a side deck, we have 2 DD Crow and 2 effect dealers. DD Crow basically just gets rid of things out of the graveyard that's very annoying and stupid. It's like if I'm playing up against something that, I know is going to go for something ridiculous and make a ridiculous play, and I can go DD Crow and stop that if need be, or like double effect dealer against, something like gadgets or something that searches a lot, or just like things that use a lot of monster effects that really just kind of troll me and slow me down. Send it to effect dealer. 2 Zombie World, mainly for the Bujin matchup because my monsters don't have to be particularly any type, so Zombie World just would do extremely well. Oh, but as I was saying, Zombie World does extremely well against the meta. Stops, Fire Fists from being able to get into their plays. It stops, Wolf Barks from being able to, summon back bears because bears at that point, aren't what they are. They don't get their searches off. They don't get to use tents in. It kind of really just hurts. It hurts Fire Fist. It hurts Bujins because they're no longer Beast Warriors. And they don't have access to the graveyard at that point either. And it's just kind of like another way just to completely troll them without having to play macro because this deck runs off the graveyard. So macro Cosmos in this deck isn't a good thing to have. But we have 2 Dust Tornado. Dust Tornado, brilliant card against Fire Fist. Stop things like Tanky, or you can stop things like macro because macro is definitely one of the major threats to this deck that really just kind of hurts you. Or like a first turn mistake from your opponent, so that they stop your first turn. Search fewer reptiles. So Dust Tornado is kind of one of those things that's really good against that. Imperial Iron Wall, stops banishment, so another counter to macro. 2 Mind Crush, just big killer. 2, a lot of decks that search a lot of cards, get into big things like go up against gadgets, and they're going to go for Fortress, and you play Mind Crush, call out Fortress. Just ditch all their stuff before they can even do anything with it. And then you have 2 Overworked because Fire Fist right now, big thing. When Medalches, are popular again, with Angeli coming out soon, Overworked. It's going to be a great, brilliant card for them too. They're not going to be able to play into their stuff because, they're going to go Chateau. Then as soon as their monsters hit the field, boom, Overworked. Just stop everything in its tracks. Let them go for that OTK. Let them go in for that OTK loop, and then just boom, Overworked. Just destroy it all. The only thing they'd have left on the field would be Invoker. Because you just basically would stop everything else before they can even get into anything else other than that. And then just 1 Soul Drain, completely shut down decks that work in the graveyard. Bujins, Heretics, Mermails. Just really, really good card overall. And they're probably wondering how this deck actually did so well. I went into a tournament the other day and won 11-0 just because, I played something that not everybody had expected. Nobody knew what I was going to use. Nobody expected me to use it. And it doesn't really have that many things that can be countered in the meta. If dark decks, were really popular, things like Evil Swarms and, stuff like that, it would honestly make sense as to why I wouldn't play this. But at the moment, those decks aren't popular. They weren't doing good. Well, they're not doing good anymore. Evil Swarms don't have a use anymore because they're not. This isn't the Dragon format. Black Wings, are doing slow and are doing poorly, but they actually recently just won again. Or so I've heard from another YouTuber friend of mine telling me that Black Wings had actually won again. So that's actually really cool that Black Wings finally had done good again. But one of the things though that is really important about what deck you pick, whether you're going into a war or a tournament or something, what what you choose is important because it will affect, what you play, how you play, how your opponent plays against you, and so on and so forth. And the reason why I actually picked Umbrals was because it wasn't something that people knew, and it was a really bad underdog deck. And if you go with things that are original and unknown that people really don't know about or use a lot, you're going to have a better chance of actually winning and doing well. Because, like, you can go with a strong version of Fire Fist, sure, but see, people are going to expect that and they're going to know how to counter you. So you're not going to, go on those perfect win streaks, or you're not going to go on to high win streaks at all. You're going to end up being on a losing streak because they know what you're going to be playing. They know how to counter you already. And you're not bringing anything new, anything that they don't know really to the table. So it's just one thing that they're not going to be able, and that they're going to be able to do to you if you take meta. So you take something that's not meta, something that nobody knows about, which I advise a lot of you guys to go and take some time into some other decks that aren't meta and make them actually work to the best of their abilities. And I know you guys can easily do that. It's just another thing is these non-meta decks that do well, the only thing that gets expensive in these decks really is your side deck and your extra deck, because that's what you need to counter their decks. I mean, your extra deck is going to be your main basic stuff that you need, like whether you're searching out for stuff or you're making draw plays, you're going into like a control play. Your extra deck is obviously going to be expensive no matter what deck you use or have. The extra deck is always going to be expensive, but the main deck in something that's unknown or not even used is very, very, very cheap, and you almost you have about a 95% chance to do better because they don't know how to counter you right away. They don't understand what you're playing or how it works. So it really puts them at a disadvantage in being able to counter you. Like, the main expected decks are meta decks when you go to tournaments. So when you decide to go for tournaments or go for competitive play, play something that not everyone expects to see. Play something that no one actually expects to see at all, and you can honestly do good with it. Like, I've been doing good with Umbrals, and they're completely unknown. People don't know really how to counter it or counter against it. So if you really want to try something that's completely, original, that's kind of a lost archetype, so to speak, quote unquote lost. This is definitely one of those decks that I recommend playing because it's strong, it has a lot of potential, and in the right hands, does really well in the meta format without really slowing down on you. And it's just a really good fun deck to play, and it's very well organized, it's very well balanced, and it's very well built, and there's a lot of plays that you can make with this deck that just makes it that much more OP. Like, every turn you almost have a play, and you will almost always either have a response or have like max C, so that if they go for something, you can just go and draw into resources and be able to play off those resources. So you have a good opportunity to make something of the deck and do very well with it, with something that nobody knows about. So take this opportunity now to start thinking about a deck that nobody uses. Just come up with something that is super insanely good that people just don't expect or even know how to play against at all. And that's my advice as someone who's been playing a lot of competitive games lately, and I've been doing a lot of wars, for other teams. Like, I've been doing like wars for other teams and stuff like that, subbing in for some of their members, and I've been getting into a lot of the war scene lately, a lot of the competitive scene. And that's really my best advice to you, is use something that's not really expected, that's very strong and has a lot of potential. So that's my main personal advice to you guys, is just go with something new that's non-meta, that is actually very strong, but take the time to get into it. Take the time to get into something that's not expected. I mean, everyone, expects Bujins, Spellbooks, Fire Fist, Constellars, fucking a lot of things that people just expect. So keep away from those expected things and go for some of the non-expected things, and actually you'll see that you get a positive response out of it And if you do really well, people are gonna be like, "Wow, that's actually really good. How did you beat me with that?" And you just don't give away your secret because you don't want to allow those decks to potentially become meta. So go with something that's completely unknown and see where it gets you, and you honestly will probably have a better chance. But anyways, Gears, I've been going on with this for a while now, but once again, contest winner, well the winner of the giveaway for the Hardcore deck is Momo Bond. So, like I said, Momo Bond, please come and contact me immediately for the deck list. And anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you actually enjoyed this or this video helped you out at all. Any new fans particularly help. And just take this advice into consideration. That's really all I can say to you. But enjoy your night, guys. See ya, and peace out.